The film begins with a scene of a gourmet meal being expertly prepared, while a voiceover states that there are three types of people: the ones above, the ones below, and the ones who fall. A young man named Goring awakens in a concrete prison cell where he is greeted by an older man named Trimagasi. Trimagasi tells him that they are on level 48 and that they are in the pit. Trimagasi wonders what their food will be. When Goring asks him to elaborate, Trimagasi states that it will be whatever the ones above leave behind. Goring looks through a rectangular hole in the bottom of the cell, revealing countless identical cells below theirs. He sees the same when he looks above. When Goring asks how the pit works, Trimagasi simply tells him that they eat, and that while it is either easy or difficult to do so depending on where you've been assigned, 48 is not that bad of a level. Goring asks him how many levels are below them, and Trimagasi says there are not many, but that soon there will be less. Goring calls out to the ones below them, but Trimagasi instructs him not to, and says that the ones above won't answer either. Goring says he has been in the pit for many months, and that they will only remain at level 48 for exactly a month. A platform containing scraps of food then lowers itself through the hole in the ceiling, stopping once it reaches them. Trimagasi begins to eat hungrily. Goring refuses to eat, disgusted at the thought of having to feast on food that 94 others have already eaten, but finds a perfectly intact apple and tucks it into his pocket, intending to save it for later. After the platform descends, Goring points out that the room is growing hotter. Trimagasi says that the temperature in the room will continue to rise until they boil alive unless Goring returns the apple he stole, and that the punishment for attempting to keep any of the food is being burned or frozen to death. Goring throws the apple back, and the temperature returns to normal. Goring offers to tell Trimagasi why he is in the pit in exchange for Trimagasi's own story. He explains that he plans on quitting smoking and that he brought a copy of Miguel de Cervantes' Don Quixote to read, as all inmates are allowed to choose one personal item to bring into the pit with them, leading Trimagasi to question if Goring admitted himself to the pit voluntarily. Goring reveals that he agreed to remain in the pit for 6 months in exchange for an accredited diploma. Trimagasi reveals that he is spending a year in the pit, offended at the fact that he is not receiving a degree. The next day, Trimagasi tells his own story. He purchased at Samurai Max, a highly efficient knife sharpener that he had seen in a television ad, before then seeing an ad for the Samurai Plus, a self-sharpening knife. In his frustration at having wasted his money on the Samurai Max, he threw his TV out his window, crushing and killing a man who was passing by. Trimagasi then confides that he doesn't know exactly how many levels there are, but that there are definitely at least 132, having stayed on level 132 before and claiming that no food reaches such low levels. Goring doesn't believe Trimagasi could have possibly survived for a month without food, but Trimagasi claims he was still able to eat in spite of the platform containing no food. The next day, a body falls through the hole, much to the horror of Goring, while Trimagasi appears wholly unfazed. Goring yells to the other cells, asking why nobody is reacting to the body. He is met with no response. It is then that Goring concludes that Trimagasi cannibalized his cellmate. Just then, the platform arrives, carrying a bruised, bloodied Asian woman named Miharu. While Goring is concerned for her, Trimagasi tells him not to worry, explaining that Miharu descends the pit every month in search of her son. Trimagasi also explains that each month, Miharu kills her cellmate so that she may have a higher chance of being paired with her son during the next month's cell rotation, and that the body that fell earlier was likely Miharu's cellmate, having been pushed by her. The platform descends and Miharu is attacked by the prisoners on level 49. Goring screams for them to stop, but is ignored. Trimagasi tells him not to interfere since they'll only keep her for a few days. Miharu kills the 2 men in self-defense and returns to the platform, looking up at Trimagasi and Goring emotionlessly before continuing her descent downward. Goring begins reading Don Quixote to Trimagasi once Miharu is gone, beginning at chapter 1. The 2 men become friends over the following month. One night, Trimagasi asks Goring if he believes in God. Goring doesn't answer, but Trimagasi asks Goring to pray for them, explaining that the room is being filled with gas that will put them to sleep, and when they wake up, they will be in a different cell. Trimagasi explains that this is his second to last month in the pit, that he doesn't think Goring will survive much longer, and that he believes he deserves a degree for his time spent in the pit. When Goring awakens, he is bound and gagged in his bed. Trimagasi appears and it is revealed that the 2 have been reassigned to level 171. While Trimagasi explains that hunger will drive a person insane and that Goring's meat is more desirable since he is younger than Trimagasi, he admits that he is reluctant to kill Goring and plans to spare his life for at least a week. Screams can be heard from above them, the screams of their fellow prisoners having discovered what levels they have been reassigned to. Several bodies fall past them through the hole. He removes Goring's gag, who begins begging for his life, but Trimagasi says their friendship was never meant to last. The platform arrives in their room, holding nothing but empty plates, which Trimagasi throws in frustration. He explains that after 8 days, he will begin cutting strips of flesh from Goring, tending to the wounds each time so that Goring doesn't bleed to death. Goring tells Trimagasi that although the death of the immigrant may have been accidental, Goring's death won't be and Trimagasi will be responsible for it, but Trimagasi retorts that the ones above will be the ones responsible. For the next 8 days, Trimagasi keeps Goring bound while the latter tries to escape to no avail. On the 8th day, Trimagasi tells Goring that the time has come for him to begin consuming his cellmate. Goring has become too exhausted to resist, and solemnly tells Trimagasi that he will hold him solely responsible for his death. Trimagasi successfully cuts a slice from Goring's leg only to be stopped by Miharu as she rides down the platform. Miharu knocks Trimagasi out with a wine bottle and uses his samurai plus to slit his throat before freeing Goring, who fatally stabs him. Goring passes out and wakes up to the sight of Miharu cutting into Trimagasi's flesh, which she uses to feed both herself and Goring. Before she continues her ride downward, Goring asks her what her son's name is. She doesn't respond. Over the next month, Goring continues to sustain himself using Trimagasi's body, experiencing a hallucination of Trimagasi. The apparition taunts him for the lack of respect and sympathy Goring showed him, claiming that while they are now both murderers, Trimagasi is the more civilized of the two. As Goring is gassed at the end of the month, he dreams of a sexual encounter with Miharu. The next morning, he is awoken by a dachshund puppy and discovers that he is on level 33. The dog is named Ramesses II and belongs to a woman named Imogiri, his new cellmate. Imogiri says she would have never come into the pit without Ramesses, while Goring scoffs and says that bringing a dog into the pit was a poor choice, as he will inevitably end up dead. Imogiri then mocks him for his own decision to bring a book, and calls him by his name, leading him to question how she knows him. She doesn't answer, only telling him he may smoke if desired, whereupon he suddenly recognizes her. A flashback scene reveals Goring, prior to his admission, being interviewed by Imogiri about any allergies or dietary restrictions he may have. It is revealed that he was smoking during the interview. Imogiri firmly told him he would not be allowed to smoke once he was admitted. She subsequently asked him what his favorite food was, though initially confused about why he was being asked this. Once Imogiri ominously explained that it would be added to the menu, Goring answered escargot à la bourguignon, snails with garlic butter. Back in the present, Goring asks if Imogiri is here to free him. She says she can't, and that much like him, she came to the pit voluntarily. Goring tells her that people die in the pit every day, which Imogiri responds is actually called a vertical self-management center. Goring asks how many levels there are, to which she responds there are 200. Goring says there is not enough food for 200 levels, but Imogiri asserts that if everyone ate only what they needed, the food would reach the lowest level. The platform arrives in their cell. While Goring eats, Imogiri prepares 2 plates and then feeds Ramesses, explaining that she plans to ration her food by feeding her dog one day and herself the next. Goring tells her that she may inadvertently cause the death of a child. Imogiri seems confused, explaining that no children under 16 are permitted into the pit. Goring says that at least one child is in the pit, but Imogiri insists that there are absolutely no exceptions to this rule. The platform descends and Imogiri tells the people below them that she has prepared plates for them. She urges them to only eat what's on the plate, then prepare similar plates for the ones below and tell them to do the same. The men on level 34 aggressively explain that they have just come from level 88 and are practically starving, when Imogiri tells them they have a responsibility to take care of those who have been less fortunate than them this month. They angrily cuss at her and begin to eat as much as they can off the platform out of spite. Goring tells Imogiri that if the prisoners were reasonable enough to ration their food, the administration would know how to prevent this from happening in the outside world. Imogiri asks Goring if he thinks everything the administration does is bad, revealing that she has been working for them for 25 years. Goring retorts that she receives special privileges because of this, having had the liberty to choose her own cellmate, unlike him. Each day, Imogiri continues to try and reason with those below her, only for her requests to go ignored each time. On the 15th day, the men are angrily confronted by Goring, who promises that if they do not follow Imogiri's instructions, he will defecate on their food for the remainder of the month. Imogiri says she wanted to convince the ones below rather than fearmonger them, but Goring insists it was the only way. Imogiri tries to convince the ones above, but Goring says they won't listen because he can't defecate upwards, therefore he has nothing to successfully threaten them with. The next day Miharu arrives on the platform, severely injured and barely conscious. As they tend to her injuries, the platform descends, and Miharu speaks for the first time in the film, only stating, "It's cold." Goring realizes that the temperature in the room is being lowered with the intent of freezing them to death. Imogiri's dog Ramesses has kept a scrap of meat. He fights the dog for the scrap and the temperature returns to normal. Miharu stays in their cell, and in the middle of the night, Goring awakens to a violent confrontation between the two women. He breaks up the fight, and as a distressed Imogiri bursts into tears, he discovers that Miharu has killed Ramesses. The next day, Miharu rides the platform down once again. Goring tells Imogiri about Miharu's search for her son. Imogiri says she wouldn't understand what Miharu is going through, since Imogiri does not have any children of her own. Goring watches as Miharu stabs the men in the cell below them, while Imogiri recalls her interview with Miharu 10 months ago, relaying that Miharu came to the pit alone. She also reveals that Miharu is an actress, that she is an orphan, she has no children, and her personal item is a ukulele. She makes racist comments about Miharu and ridicules Goring for his decision to bring a book before revealing to him that she has been sending people to the pit for 8 years, promising that she was unaware of the inhumane conditions. She takes off her shirt to expose cancerous scars across her chest, confiding that she fought the disease for 3 years and came to the pit to fix the system once she discovered that her diagnosis was terminal. The next day, the platform arrives with an untouched plate of escargot à la bourguignon. Goring is pleased by this, but places 2 snails on each ration plate rather than eating it all himself. When Goring asks Imogiri why she isn't eating, she says today was supposed to be Ramesses II's day to eat. Goring then tells her she should have something since it is the last day of the month, and they have no way of knowing what cell they'll end up in tomorrow. Goring has the misfortune of waking up in cell 202, contradicting Imogiri's earlier claims that only 200 cells existed, and is horrified to discover that many more cells still exist below them, and that Imogiri has hanged herself. Goring experiences hallucinations of Trimagasi and Imogiri telling him to consume her dead body. Greatly distressed by the hallucinations, he refuses, sustaining himself by eating pages from Don Quixote instead. He eventually gives in, slicing into Imogiri using the samurai plus that Trimagasi had left behind. The next morning, Goring awakens and finds Miharu sleeping in the bed adjacent to his. She tries to stab him with the samurai plus, but Goring wakes up screaming, revealing this encounter to be a dream. Goring discovers that he is now in cell number 6, and that his new cellmate is a religious black man named Baharat who has been trying to escape the pit for a while and is now fully convinced he will be able to. Baharat tells the man and woman above them, a couple, that God spoke to him and instructed him to escape the pit, alluding to 2 compassionate individuals aiding him and being rewarded with eternal life for doing so. They agree to help him. Baharat tosses his rope up to them, and as he begins climbing, the woman defecates on his face. The stupefied Baharat drops his rope down all the remaining levels and nearly falls into the hole himself, but is saved by Goring. Despite the platform being nearly full with food as it arrives in their cell, Baharat doesn't eat. Goring is once again visited by an apparition of Trimagasi that night, who congratulates him on having only 1 month left before he is freed from the pit. Goring convinces Baharat to ride the platform with him to convince the other prisoners to ration their food, promising to make weapons to defend themselves against rogue or belligerent prisoners who attack them. Goring estimates that there are about 250 levels altogether. Baharat asks what they should do in the event that they run out of food before reaching the lowest level. Goring says they will simply ride the platform back up. The next day, the 2 men begin their descent in spite of being ridiculed by the couple on level 5. Goring says that they will only start giving out the food once they reach level 51, since the people on the first 50 levels get to eat every day. One of the men on level 7, who helped Baharat climb a few months before, begs them to let him eat since he was on level 114 the previous month, but Goring is unsympathetic to his plight. From that point forward, the two adamantly defend the food from the prisoners on the first 50 levels. On one of the levels, they meet Senior Brambang, a man in a wheelchair who appears to have a history with Baharat. Brambang tells them that civility and discussion is more effective than violence, then says that their quest to break the system will be meaningless if the administration doesn't realize what they have done. He then suggests that they leave a beautifully prepared plate of panna cotta fully intact, and send it all the way back up to level 0 as a message for the administration. The two passionately guard the panna cotta, making sure it remains untouched, and start rationing food once they reach level 51, attacking prisoners who try to take more than what they are allotted. As they approach level 250, they come across the corpse of a man. Goring reasons that this was the cell Miharu woke up in. The platform continues its descent, forcing the men to realize that there are more than just 250 levels. The platform does not stop at any of the following levels. Baharat concludes that if there's nobody alive in a cell, the platform will not stop at that level. They hear Miharu's screams and discover that she is being attacked by two other inmates. Baharat and Goring jump off the platform and violently confront the men. Miharu is fatally stabbed. Goring briefly mourns over her corpse, but is dragged away by Baharat as the platform is leaving. The platform finally stops at level 333. Baharat assumes that they have reached the last level, and tells Goring to prepare himself for the ascension upwards. It's then that Goring notices a little girl hiding under the bed. They get off the platform, but it continues downward before they can get back on. Goring instructs Baharat, who is still holding the panna cotta, to toss it back onto the platform, but he refuses. As the platform gets further and further away from them, both men realize that the temperature in the room hasn't changed at all. The girl slowly crawls out from under the bed, revealing that she bears a striking resemblance to Miharu. Goring realizes that the son, Miharu, had been looking for is actually her daughter. Though reluctant, they feed her the panna cotta before passing out. Goring has yet another dream about Trimagasi, who commends him for his bravery in squandering the food all the way from level 6 and asks him if he plans to eat Baharat. He then hallucinates Imugiri telling him that Ramesses II is the message, only to be shaken awake by Baharat, who tells him the girl is the message. He looks to the platform to see the girl sleeping peacefully atop it, affirming that she is the message, before abruptly jolting awake, revealing this exchange to have been a dream as well. He discovers that the real Baharat has died from his injuries. Finding Miharu's daughter asleep in one of the beds, he wakes her up and brings her to the platform when it arrives. Once the platform finally arrives at the lowest level, he is once again approached by the apparition of Trimagasi, who encourages him to get off the platform and leave with him. Goring initially declines, saying he has to ride the platform back up to level 0, but Trimagasi tells him this is unnecessary since he is not the message. Goring responds that he is the bearer, and Trimagasi says, the message requires no bearer. Realizing that Trimagasi is right, Goring gets off the platform and the two walk off together as they watch the sleeping girl ascend.